Today, I'm going to be talking about the new Valentine's Day collection from Arttitude Cosmetics. I'll be doing in-depth swatches, then I'll show you how to get this makeup look, and at the end, I'll give you my first impressions and thoughts on the full collection. Also, hi! Welcome back to my channel. My name is Nupur. I love indie makeup and all things color and sparkle. If you enjoy makeup content, please consider subscribing and giving this video a like as well because I'm still relatively new to YouTube, so every little piece of engagement really helps me out and I super appreciate it. And then before we get started, I just have a few notes / disclaimers. First of all, I have swatches over on Instagram of this entire collection, and those are in a different setting, so I just feel like it gives you a bit of a different look at the eyeshadows if you're interested in that. And then I did receive this entire collection in PR, and I'm an affiliate with the brand, and my code is Nupur, so that'll save you 10% on your order, and I'll get a small commission from it. Which brings me to my next point. Please don't feel pressured to purchase anything from this collection. My goal with this video is just to provide you with as much information as possible about this entire collection. Now that we have all of that out of the way, let's get into the collection. This is a 5-pan acrylic palette that will retail for £11.99. They are stackable and magnetized to each other if you purchase multiple. Here are all of the brushes up close. This is a 10-piece synthetic brush set that will retail for £35. I will be using some of these in the tutorial portion. This is the Ink and Roses palette. It is a 16-pan palette with 10 mattes and 6 shimmers. It retails for $59 and you can use a code on it. Here are all of the mattes. The matte formula is on the thinner side with only a little kick up in the pan and for the most part easy to build up. The pastel green is a little harder to build up and I recommend packing it on. There is also a light beige sparkle matte. Just a quick note on the way I do my swatches. So I do an opaque swatch up top and then I do a slightly sheer swatch on the bottom just to give you two different views of the shadow. And then the other thing that I do is I provide both an in focus and an out of focus shot because I feel like those provide you, again, with different information about the eyeshadow. Blossom has a rosy taupe base with multicolored sparkles that are very sparkly. There is a layer of silver sparkles that don't shift, and then there are also blue sparkles that shift to pink. It is a smooth eyeshadow with a medium to small particle size. It's soft and creamy, but not overly emollient. Ink has a smoky gray base with multicolored sparkles. There are blue sparkles that shift to pink, and also pink-purple sparkles that shift to gold. This one is super dimensional, and the gray base can be sheared out. This has a bit of texture and a medium particle size, but smooths out easily. The formula is a bit soft and emollient. Inkwell is a regular charcoal shimmer with no shift. This is the only standard shimmer in the palette, but it's still more sparkly than most standard mainstream shimmers. It has a bit of texture and a medium particle size, but smooths out easily. This would make for a great smoky eye since it's hard to shear out. Eternal is an ultra sparkly regular shimmer with no shift. It has a neutral base with platinum gold sparkles. This one can be layered up for a more metallic finish or sheared out for a more twinkly finish. Due to the nature of the sparkles, the shimmer has some texture to it but isn't flaky and can be smoothed out. Secret is one of 2 truly shifty shades in the palette. It has a sheer rosy tan base with a shift that goes from pink to peach to gold. It also has tiny gold sparkles mixed in. This one has a medium particle size and also smooths out easily. It is a bit harder pressed and more dry than the other shades, which makes it a bit harder to build up to opacity. Whisper is the other shifty shade in the palette. It has a vibrant pink base and shifts gold, green, and also blue at the harshest angle. It's super sparkly too. This one is a bit on the textured side and has a medium-large particle size, but can be smoothed out. It's creamy but not emollient. There are also 4 singles launching with the collection. Each of them will retail for £11.99. I want to note that they are not labeled on the back. Mi Amor has a vibrant purple base with sparkles that shift gold, green, and blue at the harshest angle. There is also a sprinkling of pink sparkles, but they aren't very visible. It has some texture in the pan, but easily smooths out. It is super sparkly, but also quite emollient and soft. Lover's Locket is an iridescent that shifts cool pink, peach, gold, and even lime at the harshest angle. It's also super sparkly. This is one that you want to be careful not to pick up too much of, or it'll get thick and have a white cast. It has a medium particle size, and is also pretty emollient. Wild Rose has a sheer pink base and shifts a vibrant pink, peach, gold, and lime at the sharpest angle. It is super shiny and reflective. This one has quite a bit of texture in the pan and is extremely soft and emollient. This is another one that you don't want to layer too much of. Poet's Muse has a warm tan base with a chartreuse, teal, and blue shift. This one is more shiny than sparkly. It has a smaller particle size and smooths out to a very uniform finish. This one is also very creamy and emollient, but without the texture of the other shades. Okay, for the look, I've been doing a lot of pink and purple tones recently, understandably, because that's what all the brands have been putting out because it's Valentine's Day, but luckily this palette is not just pink tones, so what I'm thinking I'm going to do is play with some of these I definitely want to use these two shades, and it's just a matter of figuring out what to pair with them. So I'm just going to get started with this in my crease and see what happens after that. I'm taking the shade on the number 8 brush, and I'm just going to go ahead and put that in the crease. I think I may have picked up too much on this side because you know that I'm a build and blend girly, but we're just gonna go with it. In case you don't know how I do my tutorials is, I usually have the step that I'm currently doing already done on this eye so that you can see as I'm doing it on this eye what the end goal is supposed to be. Well, that was very easy to build up and blend out, and I didn't actually go back in for more pigment. The first time I picked it up, I did like dip the brush into the pan several times, but I didn't go back for more pigment. And then I picked up more of that shade Scribe on the number 2 brush, and I'm going to run it along my lower lash line. This brush is a little bit bigger than I normally prefer for my lower lash line, but there isn't a smaller pencil brush, so I am just making do with what is available in this set. And since it is a little bigger than I'm used to, I'm just going in with a very light hand and focusing the pigment here on the outer edge and then working my way inwards. So now I want to add some depth, and I want the outer corner to be pretty deep, so I'm going to pick up the shade Thorn on the number 3 brush and put that on the outer corner. I'm going to pack that on the outer corner first. This shade does take a little bit more effort to build up to the depth that you see in the pan, but I do prefer that with deeper shades because it's so easy for them to go overboard real fast. And then I'm going to start slowly using this brush to tap out the edge before I actually blend it out more. And I'm also going to bring it up into the crease a little bit over here. So the reason that I tapped it out first with this brush is that, well, this brush is one of the smaller crease brushes as in the set, but it doesn't have as much give as I prefer in my crease brushes, and so I'm just tapping it out with this one, and then I'm taking brush number 5 over here and using this to blend out the edges, which is what I did on this eye. And this brush number 5 has a lot more give, and it's just better for blending, I feel. So now I'm going to take number 5, and I'm going to slowly blend out the edge of the purple, and then I can add more to get that depth back. I'm going to take it slightly into the crease, and now going back to brush number 3 and adding some more depth where I lost it while blending. Going back to the larger brush now, we're just going to keep going back and forth until I get a blend that I'm happy with, since these two colors don't naturally blend together like, you know, a lighter purple and a darker purple would. That being said, these colors are blending together pretty easily, and I don't feel like they're getting muddy, which is really great. Taking some of that dark matte on brush number 10, and I'm just going to stamp it right here on the outer lower lash line first. Then I'm going to take brush number 2 again and blend it out. Taking a bit more of the dark matte and stamping it on again. I just like to slowly build it up this way so that it doesn't get too dark on the lower lash line. I just realized I didn't actually talk about the first brush that I used, brush number 8, and I really like this one because this one is my preferred shape for a crease brush for laying down a transition shade because it's got that pinched ferrule, so it's very skinny this way, and it's still pretty fluffy, so it's very good for laying down and blending out color in the crease. Now I'm going to take the shade Ink, which is such a pretty color, and this is going to go on my lid. I actually decided to only put it on 2/3 of my lid because I'm going to put something else in the inner third. Taking some of the shimmer on brush number 9, and I'm going to use that to get to the very edge of my eyelid without getting too much shimmer in my crease. This brush is quite large for a flat shader brush, but I mean, it gets the job done. It may not work this way if you have smaller lids. For reference, this is what I consider more of a standard shader brush size. This is from the Makeup Shack, and this is the one from Arttitude. But there's also a smaller shader brush. This is brush number 1, and this is smaller than even that Makeup Shack brush that I showed you, and I'm going to use it to apply shimmer to my inner third over here. And with that smaller shader brush, I'm going to pick up the shade Blossom over here. The shimmer picked up really easily on the brush, which is always a good sign. Both of the shimmers picked up easily on both of the brushes, and I really like this shimmer for the inner third because I feel like it's in some ways similar to the other shimmer, but it blends into it so well, and If you are someone who doesn't like to use a dark shimmer over your entire lid, I feel like this new shimmer that I'm putting down is going to bring some brightness to the inner third and just kind of bring things forward so it's not too deep and dark. For the inner corner, I'm going to use this single shadow Lover's Locket. I have to add a little bit of pink to this look after all. It is a Valentine's Day collection. And of course, swooping it up into the crease. This is one of those shades that you want to make sure not to pick up too much of. Then here's the final look with the lip and the mascara on. I feel like these two things always pull a look together. Then here's the look with the different light and settings, and hopefully this way you can see all of the texture and the multicolored sparkles because it is so beautiful in person. Before we get into my thoughts on the collection, I just want to emphasize that this is more of a first impressions and not a review because I've only used the palette once today, so I really need to use it a lot more before I can give you more of a review. The first thing I want to mention, because I don't know how many people know this, but Arttitude is actually a woman of color owned brand. The owner, Rooks, is South Asian, and for those of you who don't know, I am also South Asian. I'm Indian, and I just love supporting other people in my community, so I'm really happy to be doing this video today. Brooks and I were actually talking about how so many South Asian people in the makeup and beauty space tend to do more neutral glam style makeup, and there's nothing wrong with that, of course, but it's just so refreshing to see other brown people doing fun and colorful makeup. So I want to start out by talking about the acrylic palettes because I do have other acrylic palettes and this definitely holds up to them quality wise, but there's one difference that I want to talk about. The wells that the eyeshadow go into are just slightly deeper, like just a smidge deeper than other acrylic palettes that I have. And I think to a lot of people, that's not really going to be an issue. But for me, with my press-ons and my long nails, it was a little bit of an issue getting my finger in there to swatch the shadows. And quite honestly, I don't really store my single pans in these acrylic palettes because I want to keep them clean and pristine. But for when I was swatching all four of these singles, it did get a little annoying. That being said, if I was just reaching into this palette to apply one shimmer all over my lid, I don't think it would be an issue. And of course, to people who have shorter nails, this is not going to be an issue at all. Next, I want to talk about the brushes. So I actually used these 7 in my tutorial today, and I haven't used these 3, which I think that makes for a pretty good test run, though of course I won't know for a while after repeated washings how these will hold up. So are these all my preferred brush type? No. But was I able to make them work? Yes. So these are my 3 favorites that I want to talk about. First up is brush number 8. This is definitely my preferred type of brush for applying mattes to the crease and blending them out, typically transition shades, and this worked really well for that, so I really enjoyed using this one. The next one I really enjoyed is brush number 1 because it is more of a small and fluffy shader brush, which I think fluffy shader brushes are really good for applying a more dispersed sparkle to the lids, which really brings out the twinkle. And then I also really appreciate that it's pretty small, so it'll work for a variety of eye shapes. Lastly, I want to talk about brush number 5, and I only use this to blend out the outer corner shade in today's tutorial, but this kind of brush that's fluffy but still comes to a bit of a dome is another type of brush that I like using in my crease to apply transition shades. I do wish that some of these brushes would be sold individually because realistically, most people are not going to like every single brush in a brush set. And if you are a beginner and you're trying to collect a bunch of brushes, I can see why having a set would be great. But if you already have a bunch of eye brushes, then I think it would be far more beneficial to be able to pick and choose which ones you want to bring into your collection. Next, let's talk about the palette because I know that that's what most people are interested in. To me, this feels like a traditional Valentine's Day color story, but with a bit of a twist because you have your classic pinks over here, but you also have some muted options for pinks like this, and even this shade over here is, yeah, it's a bit pink leaning, though it's a little neutral. But then in addition to the pinks, what you also have are these greens over here and even this sort of desaturated green color. And the reason that I really like the green with the pinks, aside from being a Wicked reference, is that they remind me of roses, which are a classic Valentine's Day fixture. There are some neutrals in here which I don't particularly care for in a colorful palette, but I can see how they work with the pinks here because I feel like pinks, especially these muted types of pinks, are colors that people who maybe only wear neutrals would be interested in wearing. So I can see how this palette has a lot of crossover appeal. I also really like the variety in mattes in terms of depth because one thing that Arttitude always knows how to do is give us multiple options for depth that aren't just a straight black matte. I also want to briefly mention that there is one sparkle matte, but the sparkles in here are extremely fine, much more fine than I'm used to seeing in sparkle mattes, and the tone, the color of the sparkles are very close to the matte itself. So they're not as noticeable as in other sparkle mattes. Now for the shimmers. So there are only 6 shimmers in this palette, which is on the lower side considering that it's a 16 pan palette, but I know that the owner has mentioned in the past that she likes her palettes to be matte heavy and have less shimmers because it keeps the palettes on the more affordable side. Even though I'm a shimmer girly, I can appreciate that logic, and what I do also appreciate is that within the 6 shimmers, there's a good variety in the types of shimmers. And what I mean by that is that we have 2 shifty shades, this one and this one. We have 2 shades with multicolored sparkles, this one and this one. We have one regular shimmer, this one, and then we have one ultra sparkly shimmer right here. I do want to note that the shimmers in here are a bit on the creamy side, so if you struggle with creasing, I don't know what the longevity will be like on you. Then really quickly, I just wanted to compare vintage neutrals and ink and roses because someone on Instagram asked me whether the green shades were similar, and the 2 pastels are close but not exactly the same. The one in ink and roses has more white in it and is slightly more muted, and then with the deeper green shades, the one in ink and roses is deeper than the green matte on the bottom over here, and the green matte at the top over here is much more teal than this green. Lastly, I want to talk about the singles really quickly. So I do really appreciate the brand is offering single multichrome shadows on the side because, as I previously mentioned, sparkly shades, especially shifty sparkly shades, really drive up the cost of a palette. So I like that these are available on the side to complement the palette and that people can pick and choose which ones they want. So that way they're not locked into getting all 4 of them within the palette and they can just pick up whatever they think will add to their collection. That being said, I wasn't the biggest fan of the formula on these because they were pretty emollient, which typically means that they will crease on people who struggle with that. So I think that the shades themselves are beautiful, and I hope that the brand continues to offer singles in the future, but I also hope that the formula improves. And that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching till the end. It really means so much to me, and I truly, truly appreciate it. And if you made it to the end, please leave me a comment with what your favorite part of the collection was, or what are your plans for Valentine's Day? I am so curious. I hope you have a wonderful Valentine's Day, even if you aren't celebrating, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye! To me, this feels like a traditional Valentine's Day color story with a twist. A tweet!